So again, welcome, thank you. I really appreciate you guys signing up. I had a really nice response to this, 65 people, which is brilliant. I haven't had quite that many people log in, but I think sometimes people mean to do something and then forget, and that's fine. But again, I'll send it out again. So hopefully everybody can see it. So we'll start with a little bit of an agenda on how we're going to move on through today. We're going to talk about some common practice mistakes that people make when they're practicing. We're going to talk about good practice. What is good practice? And that's really going to form the base of today's webinar. We're going to talk about practice types, and I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, practice is practice. How many types can there be? There's a lot of different ways we can practice, and some are more effective than others. So we're going to talk about the different practice types. What to practice. We're going to talk about best things to practice for you. How to plan your practice. I mean, that sounds kind of quite dramatic, really, planning your practice if you just want to nip down the driving range to hit some balls. But if we're talking about serious long-term improvement, and if you're somebody that attends regular lessons or attends academy sessions or regularly plays and practices, it's good to have a plan in place for your practice. On-course practice, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can actually practice on the golf course rather than just on the driving range. The practice mindset and really what that means, and how being in the right mind can make a huge difference when we're learning. We'll talk about a few competitive ideas in your practice as well. And as this webinar goes on, you'll see a lot of what I'm going to talk about is the importance of having some competitive element to your practice. We're going to follow up then with a bit of a summary and then answer some questions. One of the things I wanted to say to you all was, if at any point you've got a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and just butt in, ask the question there and then is absolutely fine. But please keep yourself muted all the other time that you're not specifically trying to ask a question. Otherwise, if you're familiar with Zoom, just drop me a message on the chat box and I will pick it up as soon as I can and I'll answer it. So, common practice mistakes. So I see this a lot, rocking up to the driving range with just one club. The worst thing in the world is just seeing somebody turn up with a driver in their hand. So not taking all clubs to a practice session. I think it's absolutely key that you take your whole bag to the practice session, regardless whether you're going to hit every single club or not. So it's really important, and you'll find out why that's so important as we go on. Having no structure to the session, so turning up, not really knowing what you're trying to achieve, not really knowing why you're there, really. And that sounds silly, but just hitting ball after ball is what a lot of people do. That's most people's way of practicing, and there's no real structure to what they're doing. Full shots only with no build up. I see this an awful lot where golfers will come to the range and the first club they hit's their driver, and then they might hit some others, but there's no real build up, so they're not starting short, loosening up, getting a feel for their swing before they're then making really big swings. Only practicing the enjoyable stuff, that's really common. I mean, I think probably all of us are guilty of that, because this is a game and we're doing it for fun and we want to enjoy it. But I'm going to hopefully today give you some ideas on how you can enjoy the bits that perhaps aren't normally enjoyable. No break between shots is another really common one. I saw a golfer once actually at a driving range, and they must have had about 20 or 30 balls that I watched them for, and it was like a machine gun. They didn't even lift their head to look where the ball went. So if you can imagine a golfer hitting with their head down, dragging the next ball in, hitting it, dragging it. If I asked them where any of the balls went, they wouldn't have been able to tell me. So there was no real break between shots to kind of assess or gather themselves. And if you think when we're actually playing golf on the golf course, that isn't how we play the game. And then there's two extremes of aiming as well that I see people make as well. They're either extremely pinpoint and they're aiming at a ridiculously small target, which again, if you attended my on-course management webinar, you'll know about that we're hitting into a zone and we're not hitting at a particular point, that we're not aiming at a really, really tiny spot. Or the absolute opposite, they have no target and just hitting aimlessly, not really having any idea of where the balls are going relative to any kind of target or zone. So I'm sure that some of those mistakes you will recognize that you have done in the past. You may do some or all of them now. Hopefully after today you won't. And going forward, certainly this is going to be much more into my coaching programs. We're going to see a lot more about practice and how you practice, because it's really important, really, really, really important that we're practicing the right way. So why practice? And I kind of asked myself this question, and it's obvious really, but then again, maybe not, because I think there's two types of golfer. Golfer A practices to groove in swing changes. They're taking lessons and they want to make changes. So they're grooving in swing changes. They want to hit better shots ultimately. They're improving weak areas. So they're practicing the parts of the game that aren't very good to try and make them better. And they're trying to achieve goals. Ultimately, if you want to, I don't know, hit more fairways, then you need to work on certain things. If you want to hit more greens, you need to work on things. If you want to get up and down or hold more putts, you know, you need to practice those areas. So that golfer would be the one doing those things. And understanding our faults and bad shots as well is really, really key for that reason. So that golfer A, in my opinion, is kind of the person who's very much in tune with really why they're practicing. They've got a goal in mind and they're working towards it. This might be you. Ultimately is to perform better in play. Or you might be golfer B. They practice because they're told they should. Feel good factor. I've done it in the past. I've sort of felt like I haven't hit enough balls, so I go up to the driving range and hit some balls and come away, and I feel good because I've done some practice. But have I actually practiced? To pass time, to be seen to be working at their game. I think a lot of the time there can be sort of peer pressure, particularly in some really competitive golf clubs where you're members of teams. So that, and again, can be just to be seen to be working at your game, or doing it because it's just the right thing to do. If we want to get better, we should go to the driving range twice a week and hit 50 balls and we're going to get better, which obviously isn't the case, but it feels like we're going there. It's the right thing to do. So brings me on to kind of what is good practice. Most golfers judge good practice based on the time they've spent hitting balls. And this mindset really needs to change if you want to practice, if you want your practice to make a difference to your game. And I hear it a lot of the time, golfers saying, oh, you know, I've done a lot of practice. I practice 3 times a week for an hour at a time. But really the content of the practice is the most important thing. So how you practice is far more important than how long you practice for. So what is quality practice? So we're going to talk a little bit about what real quality practice is. Now, whenever we go to a practice session, it's really important that you ask yourself these 2 questions. One, what is my objective for this practice session? And That might sound obvious. Well, I'm going to practice because I want to get better. But actually, you need to ask yourself that question a little bit deeper. And really, what is my objective for this practice session? So what am I actually really trying to do here? Am I working on something that my coach has got me doing? Am I working, I've got a competition coming up and my driving's not very good. So am I going to go and hit some balls to try and figure out my driving? Whatever it might be, you need to have a solid objective for your practice session, because that's going to build the basis of what you do during that time. Again, you all have fallen into that trap. I've all fallen into the trap. Is we can turn up, hit balls, come away, and we've practiced because we feel we've hit balls and we've had a session. And it feels like we've practiced, but really we didn't really have an objective. We were just going to hit balls because we thought it was the right thing to do, and we're practicing our swing, for example. But that's not enough, in my opinion. If you really want to improve, that's not enough. And the second question would be, what would a successful practice session look like? When you come away from your practice session, what would you hope to have achieved? So that question will be answered at the end of this webinar, and you'll see why, because when I show you the structure and the system that you should have in place when you're practicing, you'll know what a successful practice session should look like. So that question will be answered as we go. So there are three types of practice that are termed in the coaching world, particularly, not particularly in the golf world actually. This can apply for anything in life, and I'm sure some of you have come across these terms before. Some of you may not have, but I'm going to show you them now, and we're going to talk through these key practice types are going to build the basis of your practice sessions. So they are random practice, block practice, and competitive practice. Every practice session should have some of each one of those elements to it. Every practice session. Some golfers should have more random, some should have more block, and some should have more competitive. But I'll say it now, and I'll probably say it again as we go. Everyone, when they're practicing over a long period of time, should have some competitive practice in what they're doing. So the three key practice types. In fact, one moment, I'm just going to turn my video on. I can see you, but you can't see me, and I feel like maybe that's not fair. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So the three key practice types. The first one, block practice. So we're going to talk about block practice here. Now, block practice is, for example, this would be a good example, hitting 50 balls with the same club to the same target with little rest in between shots. Okay, so that would be I would say 99% of golfers going to the driving range. Maybe they'll just take two clubs with them and they'll hit ball after ball after ball, one target, and they'll just hit away. Now that's fine, but that can't be the only practice we do, because if it is, we'll just get good at being on the driving range, hitting ball after ball after ball, and we'll be good at doing that. But when it comes to playing golf on a golf course in a different situation, it won't stand up. It's good because it grooves in new feelings. So to get good at something, it's obvious we need to repeat it. We need to do it over and over again. It's not something that we can do once and expect it to be there. We've got to keep doing it. Helps build confidence and finds repetition. So this is a good thing, maybe particularly for beginner golfers, is, you know, if you can hit the ball over and over and over again, you build confidence in what you're doing. You get into some repetition, you get into a bit of a groove, and you can hit some nice shots and you can keep repeating it. So it's good for our confidence. But it has no direct carryover to the golf course. So we're not, or when we play golf, we're not hitting one ball after the next with, you know, little rest in between. It's just not how we play the game. Has no related consequence. So, you know, you can hit a bad shot and then just grab another ball. It doesn't matter. Again, it matters hugely when we're on the golf course and we hit a bad shot. So we can't expect that block practice to be the only one we do, because it doesn't have a consequence related to the outcome. The next type of practice is random or varied. You might see it termed as varied practice. Now, this is much more like playing golf. It's still simulated. We're still on a driving range. So, you know, we're hitting 50 balls, say, but we're changing our club, we're changing our target, we're maybe going through our pre-shot routine, and we're leaving a small period of time between each shot to somewhat simulate real play. There may be 5 minutes, 10 minutes between hitting shots on the golf course. So, you know, we need to practice this way. And I guarantee you would see different outcomes when you hit balls on the driving range. If you had 20 balls and you hit one ball every 5 minutes, you would see a different outcome. You'd see a different shot pattern than if you hit those 20 balls in the space of 5 minutes. Because every time you make a movement, every time you leave or walk away, every 30 seconds, I believe it is, or every 7 seconds, sorry, we lose 30% of that feeling. So for every 7, 14, 21 seconds, you've now lost 90% of that feeling. So that's why golfers hit balls very quickly, because they get into a sense that they can repeat it and they can hold on to the feel. But we can't do that on the golf course. So is that a great way to practice? No, we need to randomize it, step away, get used to going through our pre-shot routine and work at it that way. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do any block practice, but you absolutely should do some, and you should have some varied. We need a mixture of all of it. Now, this requires more focus. It forces breaks in between shots, which is good for the reasons that I've just spoken about there. And it has a direct carryover, or I would say it has a more direct carryover to the golf course. We should be able to, when we play, we're aiming to hit the shot that we want to hit on demand. So if you can put that into a driving range scenario, excuse me, then that is exactly the same. We want to be able to hit the shot on demand. If you were to stand on the range for 5 minutes and then just hit one ball on demand and then leave it another 5 minutes and hit the other ball on demand how you want to, there's a good chance you'll be able to do the same thing on the golf course. But if you're, again, hitting too many balls in succession, it doesn't have the same effect. It requires less balls but more quality. So when we practice with our random practice, we need to be not trying to do it with 100 golf balls, because you'll soon get time will not pass very quickly. You'll get 10 balls in and you'll think, well, this is taking too long, and you won't bother. So when we plan our sessions, we need to have an element of it that's varied and random, that will maybe just be 20 balls, but those 20 balls are real quality. And the third type of practice is competitive, and this is the single most important part of our practice. So as an example, you know, you might select a set target area to hit 5 balls and record how many balls you get inside that area. You're competing. There's a consequence if you don't get it right, because if you're on a coaching program of mine, then I might ask you to do this and show me your results. I have a player who texts me her results when she practices, and she'll text me, you're only allowed to do the competition once. You're only allowed to, at the end of your practice session, You set up whatever it is you're going to do, and it can be really simple, but you only get to do it once. And you're putting yourself under a little bit of pressure there, because you've got to send your results to your coach, and there in itself is the accountability and the pressure. It's close to handing your scorecard in and having the whole clubhouse see your score. It's as close as we can get when we practice. You need to be accountable, and you need to have that kind of pressure situation when you practice. And I would compare it to, for example, think about a Formula One team when they're racing their cars around a track. If they are they're going around in 1 minute 25 seconds, for example, in practice, in their practice time, why would they think that they can go around in 1 minute 23 in competition? So the competitive element of your practice is going to tell you where you are at with your golf. So for example, let's say we do a game where you're chipping and putting, and you've got to chip on and hole your putts, and you've got to score, I don't know, let's say you score 5 out of 10 in your competition, and that's the best you've ever done. Well, there's no reason why you should do any better than that when you go on the golf course. So the competitive element of practice isn't only good because it simulates close to our on-course situation, but it also, again, holds you accountable, and it gives you a real benchmark of where you are at with your game, because you can see that the block practice doesn't give you the same kind of where you're at with your game than competition does. Because when you're doing block practice, you can easily forget the bad shot and drag another ball in. When you're doing your competitive practice, that bad shot counts, just as it counts when you're on the golf course playing in your tournaments. So most important type of practice, it must have some sort of scorecard to it. Like I say, one of my students text me, that's fine, text me your score for that particular practice you're doing. Write it down in your notebook. I've just had some notebooks made up, and anybody that comes on a program with mine gets a notebook, and you will have that when you practice, when you play, and it's just really important. So we've got that two-way communication, and I can say to you, how's your practice gone? How did you get on with your putting, score from 10 feet? Have you written your scores down? And again, it's holding yourself accountable. And if you don't do it, you can't expect to get better on the golf course. So it has a direct carryover to the golf course. Again, this is why I like it. And we've got to make it more difficult than in play. So let's say, for example, you need to hit, I don't know, to get your handicap down to 15 or get your handicap down to 8 or down to 5, we've established that you need to hit more fairways. And let's say you need to hit 7 fairways, for example, or 10 fairways. If we give you a competition to do in your practice where you are scoring the number of drives that you hit through goalposts on the range or 2 targets on the range, and you might score 7 out of 10, you might score 3 out of 10. It gives you that benchmark of where you're at. So it's got to be more difficult. So let's say you want to hit 7. In practice, we want to get you hitting 9. Because you've got to take into consideration, once you're on the golf course, there's so many more factors as well that can come into things psychologically that will have an effect on performance. So making it more difficult than in a real situation is key. Must be held accountable. And again, the way of doing that is either showing to your coach or practicing with somebody else. And we'll come on to that later on. So what should we practice? Now, whenever we're practicing, we need to think about the time we have to practice and our expectations. Now, we can't expect to perform at a particularly high level if we don't have the time to practice. It's really straightforward. If you don't practice, you're not going to improve. And that's really quite as simple as it is. So the more you put in, the more you get out. I was fortunate enough as a youngster to be a national level gymnast into my early teens. And my expectations were really high, but I was practicing and training 6 or 7 times a week, sometimes twice a day. So I would expect a high level of performance, and to get to that high level of performance, I had to put that time in. And if I was only practicing or training once a week, there's no way that I could have those same expectations as the gymnast that's practicing 7 days a week. So we need to weigh it up. And the first thing you do when you think, okay, where do I want to be? Where are my goals? Where do I want to be in, let's say, 6 months' time? Well, how much time can I dedicate to practice? That's the first thing. And once we've established that we can practice, I can only ever practice once a week for half an hour and that's it, that's fine. But so long as our expectations are in line with that, and I might say, be honest and say, with that little practice, it's going to be difficult to achieve that goal. Or, with that amount of practice, great, you've got 3 days a week that you can practice and you only want to knock one shot off your handicap. I don't see that being a problem. So there's a balance there that is really, really vital. We practice based on our statistics and based on our goals. So what do you want to achieve? Where do you want to be? What are your weak areas? If statistically you're having, lots and lots of putts, you better practice your putting. But the facts are, most people practice what they enjoy practicing, and a lot of things get pushed aside because they're not enjoyable. And that's really the key to purposeful practice, is practicing the parts that need the work based on statistics or your goals. It's usually what you enjoy practicing the least. It's what you need to practice. So I think that's very, very true. One rule that you could work by, and this is something that I absolutely work by myself with my own golf, is make it a goal to make the worst part of your game the best. And if you can do that, that would change your game. It's easy to shy away from those worst parts because it's not enjoyable. But if you really want to improve your golf long term, and you're on this webinar, because you do, then trying to make the worst part of your game the best is a really straightforward rule to kind of work by when we're practicing and when we're structuring our practice. So what should we practice? Now, again, this is where it comes down to what you can do. How many practice sessions a week can you make? I've already mentioned that. That's an important factor. How long can you practice for each time? Do your practice facilities allow you to practice all areas of your game? If you're at a driving range where you're not allowed to use woods, but your driving sucks, you need to go and practice somewhere else. If you don't have a short game area where you generally practice, or at your club, and you can't chip and you can't chip onto the green, you need to go and find a practice facility where you can, if that's a weak part of your game. Most golfers, their golf is shaped by their practice environment. And if you look at it, let's look at the best players. You look at certain players that have grown up on links golf courses, how their game's shaped. I see golfers all the time that have played golf on links golf courses. Excuse me. And because of their environment, they hit the ball very, very low because they've always had to. They're very good at chip and runs because they've always had to play that sort of game on links courses. And equally, I see the opposite on other golf courses that perhaps are a little bit more wet or a bit softer. Those golfers like to fly the ball all the way and land it on the green. They don't chip and run very often. But when it comes to playing different golf courses, you need the ability to play those different shots. So if your practice facilities don't allow you to practice all areas of your game, you need to find somewhere where you can. It's quite straightforward. If you're restricted by opening times, I know work if you're working and you can't get to the driving range, all these things are factors restricted by light this time of year. You know, if I was to give you a short game challenge to do in your practice at this time of year, and it's dark, or maybe not quite now, but earlier on in the winter, it's dark at 4 o'clock, and you can't get to the practice range until after work, for example, in the evening, you're not going to be able to practice your short game. That may be the case for the whole winter for you. So that also needs to come into place when you're thinking about your expectations for what it is you need to work on. And dividing your time appropriately when you practice. And that is a key element for when we're trying to build our practice sessions. And this is something, again, that I'm going to help you do. So as a general rule, now I don't like general rules because I want to be specific with everybody as an individual, but I think this is a good starting point if you're lost with your practice and you don't really know whether you're coming or going, and you don't really know, or you don't want to take it any further than this webinar and you just want some advice to go away with. This is a good general rule for you. Apply the quarter rule. So we're going to split golf into 4 areas. So we've got putting, which we would split down again into distance, speed, and holing out. Holing out would be those short putts from 2 or 3 feet that we miss too often. Scoring zone. Now, for some people, the scoring zone will be different to others. A scoring zone would be your approach shot to the green with a mid-iron. So let's say, I don't know, a 7 or an 8 iron shot to the green. That's your scoring zone, because if you can hit the green or be very close to the green from that distance, then you're going to play good golf. Most golfers do not hit the green with a 7 iron from the fairway. Most golfers don't. The average golfer doesn't. The average golfer perhaps isn't expected to, but we need to make that a really important part of our practice. And that will be split into our distance control and our accuracy. We're either too short, too long, or too left and too right. We're very, very rarely too long. Most people on here, I'm sure you will agree with me, when you hit your shot to the green, you're normally too short, or left or right. And short game, so chipping, pitching, bunkers. So if we were to split, sorry, there's one more, long game, irons, hybrids and woods. So if we were to split our game up, it would be putting, scoring zone, short game, and then long game. Now again, it's important for you to have some sort of basic, very, very basic statistics, either written down, which would be ideal, or in your head, which area of the game there is your strongest. And just think about it now, you know, putting, scoring zone, short game, long game, and where's your handicap? Where are your handicap shots going? Are they going around the green? Are they going off the tee? Are you not hitting enough greens? Or is your short game not up to scratch? Now, this is something that I don't see enough, but it's something that kids do, because kids are creative. And as we get older, our creativity gets taught out of us, unfortunately. Now, I see this all the time. We practice from good lies. I'm going to talk a little bit about short game in this, because this is the best way to think about short game. In this country, we practice off mats. Unless you're fortunate enough to be at a golf club where you have a grass practice tee, most golf courses don't. Most golf courses hitting off mat. But even if you're on the grass, I can guarantee you prop your ball up on a nice bit of turf before you hit it. That doesn't happen on the golf course, obviously. So there needs to be a time where we don't practice from the good lies. That's really important, and that makes up a good part of our practice session. So we often practice from good lies. I was given a golf lesson once and turned up to the short game area. Young lad was chipping balls away, and every time he brought a ball in, he brought it up and he balanced it on a nice little tuft, and he was hitting beautiful chip shots close to the flag. And I said, we're working on your chipping today. It looks pretty good. And he said, yeah, but it's just not very good when I'm on the course. I'm pretty good like this when I practice. And I said, that's interesting. Can you not chip from a makeshift tee, please? Could you put it on maybe over there on that little bit of mud? Or can you just, tread it a little bit into the grass? And can I just see a few shots from there? And obviously, lo and behold, the shots weren't so close to the target. So again, the practice was not representative of the on-course situation. That's a really good example there of how we need to make it very much representative of what it is on the golf course. So you need to challenge yourself. It's not, well, it is fun. It is fun. You're kind of testing yourself. I suppose it takes the pressure off a little bit because you're not expected perhaps to chip them really close to the green or hit really, really fantastic shots when the ball's not sitting very well. But you're not expected to, but you need to expose yourself to those different types of lies. Place them from some unexpected positions. Now, little story, the 2007 Open Championship, I was watching it, but I heard this story from a tour coach who was there at the time. And there was a tour player practicing from a bunker. And if you look at the picture here on the screen, you see, I think that's Tiger. He's got one leg out the bunker, one leg in. And this golfer was practicing, it was at Carnoustie in 2007. And this golfer was practicing left-handed out of a bunker. He was a right-handed golfer, and he was standing outside the bunker practicing left-handed with his club round the wrong way. And he was on the practice ground, and he got a few funny looks and a few giggles because people thought he was messing about. But if you know links golf, you know the bunkers there are very, very small. And if your ball happens to roll into a very small pot bunker, sometimes you're left with some really horrible positions that you need to get out of. And this golfer was practicing that position, and his coach was there, and another player walked past and said, "Hey, so you like having a bit of fun, or what you doing?" He said, "No, this is I'll probably find myself in this situation a few times, so I'm just having a go, Anyway, so this golfer plays his round and he wins. This, I don't know if anybody knows who it is. 2007 Carnoustie Open champion, and it was Podrick Harrington, and he actually had a shot in that tournament where he needed to play that exact shot. He went in the wrong side of the bunker and he had to get it out, and it was that exact shot he was practicing, and he played it. He managed to get it out and play it. So, and he went on to win the tournament. Now, he may still have won the tournament if he hadn't have practiced that, but he certainly may not have. So practice from unexpected positions. When we were kids, we used to practice we'd always practice as kids together, so there'd be 2 or 3 of us, and we would always have challenges. And again, this is something I was saying, that this is what kids do really, really well, and I see it now with youngsters when they're playing and practicing around my home course. They will have competition between themselves. And I remember there was a really big branch, a low branch that you could climb up onto, and it was next to our putting green. And I remember actually us at one stage balancing the ball on this branch and having to chip off the tree to the hole. And we, thinking back, we put a consequence on it as well. The winner, whenever we did this, we always played for a golf ball, but it had to be the best golf ball in your bag. So the other golfers would get to go through your golf balls and choose the best golf ball in your bag that you would play for. So there's the competition, there's the accountability, and there's the pressure. So when you see kids that are practicing that way, they're the ones that generally go on to excel in particular areas. Now, I remember doing this loads. And my short game absolutely is the best part of my game. Maybe by coincidence, but maybe not, because that's an area that I really challenged and always loved exploring and practicing. So, yeah, challenging yourself, play some unexpected positions, play from some horrible positions, but set your expectations low and be in the right mindset when you're doing it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. So a plug ball in a bunker, for example, if you're practicing your bunker play, don't just put it on a nice lie, stand on it, plug it in there a little bit. You know, those sort of things are a good way to get us practicing for reality. So planning your practice. Golf is secondary, probably further down the list than secondary for most people. If you're fortunate, it's very high on your priorities. So we need to fit it around our life, but manage our expectations as we do it. And I've mentioned that already, so I won't repeat myself there. If we set our objectives too high, excuse me, don't set them too high, sorry, if you're limited on practice time. This is a really key one as well. Plan for breaks during your session. So when we do a practice session, let's say you're going to practice you're going to go to the driving range for an hour. You're going to split your session into, say, you're going to practice your 4 different sessions. You're going to do 15 minutes on each, or you might do 10 minutes on each, but you're going to have a bit of a break in between each one. And that's really quite important, because when you're actually practicing, and this is really, really, really key. Let me take a step back there. When you're actually practicing, you need to be completely engrossed, completely focused, and completely concentrated in what you're doing. So if you're on the driving range and you've got your 25 balls that you're just about to work on your swing with, your phone needs to be off. You need not to speak to anyone. You know, it really needs to be kind of tunnel vision practice and really focused in. So planning for breaks helps you check your phone, go to the toilet, do whatever you want to do. But it's really quite important that that's in there for you. And using your notebook, absolutely key. Write down things that perhaps have not worked so well in your practice session, but use it again for your competitive element where you're recording your scores. Record in your notebook when you're practicing. Let's say when you're doing your block practice, I'm asking you to, I don't know, change something in your swing, and you can write down how many you hit well, how many you hit poorly, for example. So we've said this before, set objectives in your practice sessions, concentration levels high, no distractions. You know, think about it, if anything really, if you're working and you're busy in your job, whatever it is you're doing, you're going to be in a point where you're absolutely at some stage in the zone. You've got a really high level of concentration, and you need to be in that situation. You need to be in that level there to be able to work efficiently and effectively. So being really focused is really, really key to good practice. And practicing with someone else. This is really something that maybe I overlooked in the past, but again, going back with kids, we always practiced with, you know, you don't get many kids that go to the driving range on their own. Most of them are going there with their friends. It's easy to be competitive when you've got someone else there. Going back to my gymnastics reference, I had a training partner, and it bugged me when he could do something that I couldn't do. I mean, it really bugged me, and it pushed me, and it made me want to practice harder. So practicing with someone else really, really helps with motivation. And there's a question later on that someone said about motivation. If you practice with someone else, it helps. If you go to the gym with someone else, it helps you get up off the sofa and go to the gym, because they pull you along sometimes and you pull them along sometimes. So having a practice partner is a really good thing to have. Now, that's whether you are an elite player. There are tour professionals that will practice with other tour professionals. They will practice with each other. Or you're a beginner. If you're a beginner, brilliant. Find someone else that's a beginner. Practice with them. It really, really helps to keep your motivation up when it's difficult to, when it's difficult to do it, because you're being accountable and you don't want to let that other person down. Okay, practice on the golf course. So when we practice on the golf course, or when we practice in general, most of the time it's not on the golf course. And I was asked this question: how much time do you spend practicing on the golf course? I would say that unless you're playing for something, so unless you're playing a match, or unless you're playing some sort of competition, then you should be looking at your play on the golf course as practice. Now, this is maybe geared towards golfers that are serious about performing well and getting their handicap down, because to get your handicap down, I know the handicap system's changed now, but to get your handicap down, generally you're doing it playing in competition. So use the rounds of golf where you are either on your own or with your friend. Use that as practice, just as you would on the driving range. Don't see it as a different thing. You may have times where you want to just go for a walk and hit a few balls around the course to clear your mind. Fine. But if you're thinking about going out to play to improve your golf, then there are things you can do on the golf course. So we can break up our round into little mini practices. So for example, we can say only if we want to practice our irons, we might only hit our irons off the tee. In fact, a good example of this, when I was a junior golfer, I grew up playing on a very, very short golf course. And you could hit a driver and a pitching wedge to every green pretty much. The par threes weren't very long, but there weren't many of them either. And what we did, and our junior organizer was brilliant at this, what we made us do is we went out and played when we practiced, and we weren't allowed to hit anything longer off the tee than a 7-iron, so that it made our second shot into the green longer. Because when we went and played tournaments at other golf clubs against other golfers, we're playing longer golf courses where we have to hit a 5-iron to a green or a 7-iron to a green. We're no longer just hitting wedges. So that was a really good thing for me as a kid growing up. It may be that you want to go out and you want to practice getting your wedges closer to the green. So you might set yourself an objective when you go out and play your practice game and say, okay, every time I hit a wedge, it has to get pin high. Pin high means it has to get up level with the flag, even if it's left or right of it. It has to get pin high every time. Every time it does, I'm going to give myself a point. Every time it doesn't, I'm going to deduct a point. And have that as your goal. Your score is absolutely irrelevant. How many fairways you hit is absolutely irrelevant in that round. How many putts you have is irrelevant. What's relevant is when you play, every time you have a wedge, you hit it pin high. That might be your target when you practice. There can be some psychological, again, use your notebook. There could be some psychological practices as well that we'll talk about on the course, and set those objectives before you play. Course management, you can practice course management. And again, if you haven't seen my course management webinar, I'll send a link to all my webinars after this. But if you haven't seen my course management webinar, please have a look at it. It's exactly the same format as this. It's on YouTube. And we talk there about planning and plotting our way around a golf course. You can have times where you play around a golf and your sole purpose is to practice your course management. Look at the zone you're hitting into. Look at your distance. Start to measure your distances and those sort of things. Practice your psychology. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that none of you do this, but I'm sure very few golfers go out and play a round of golf and they practice their golf psychology. Yet I get a lot of golfers say to me, oh, golf's all in the mind. Well, I'm not sure it's all in the mind, but certainly what we think and our psychology certainly has a huge influence on our shots and on our performance. So bear with me just one moment. The psychology, for example, good practice for psychology, the Tiger Woods one. So Tiger Woods, when he was growing up, his dad taught him a lot of things. His dad sort of coached him in his youth. And one thing he taught him to keep a positive mindset, if you like, is he taught him never to look below the level of the flag. So you'll see when he walks down the fairway, he is always looking level. His eye line is always above the flag stick. And that comes, good posture brings confidence, It brings kind of a leadership, it brings a power. When you see someone that's got good posture, it kind of, you know, when someone sits or stands with good posture, it has a significant sort of psychological effect. So not only do others see you kind of as more sort of powerful, if you like, or more in control, particularly playing match play, but it helps you yourself feel and act more confident as well. I know certainly, you know, you walk with your head up or you walk slumped. It goes both ways. When we're unhappy, we hang our head and we look down. It's a natural thing to do. But by hanging our head and looking down, it can have the effect the other way. It can make us feel negative. So that's a really good one you can practice when you're on the golf course. Eye line level, don't look below the level of the flagstick. You know, that's a really good thing there. Something for, say, our tempo. You know, when we're playing badly, we tend to speed up or we tend to change our tempo. So I don't know how many of you here have electric trolleys. I have electric trolley when I use my big tour bag, when I'm not carrying, and you can set it on a certain speed. Set it on the same speed every time. Set it on 6 or set it on 7 or set it on 5 or whatever it is your pace is. You always have your own pace. Keep it set on that pace because it keeps you in that same, keeps you at that same speed, keeps you at that same level. So that's a good practice when you're on the golf course. And all these little things make up your practice plan, if you like, so that when you are practicing, when you're playing, you can stick to these little points and all of them adding up start to make a real difference in your game. We can practice our fairways, greens, short games. So there's endless amounts of things we can do on the golf course to practice. We might say, again, go back to our objectives. You might say, today, I just want to try and hit as many fairways as possible. That might mean I don't hit my driver very often. And let's see what happens. Let's see what happens if I hit an iron off the tee and I hit more fairways, although I might be further back. Let's see how that affects my next shot. You know, interestingly, you might find that it puts you in a different position that's easier to play from. Let's see if I can hit more greens. Let's see if I can get up and down more around the green with my short game. Those sort of things should be practiced when we're on the golf course as we're playing. Now, mindset is something, excuse me, I just need to have a drink. Mindset is something that is really key when it comes to practice. You'll find that most golfers that improve their game over a period of time or have achieved a very high level, they have a certain mindset. It's kind of a discovery, curious mindset. When you watch children learn something, they are very curious, and it's discovery, and they do it through play and they figure things out. Now, there needs to be a level of that when we practice. So for example, when we hit a poor golf shot, instead of it being a negative thought process, it needs to be more of a curious one. You know, okay, why did that happen? Let's try and figure it out. That's really how we develop from there. We need that positive sort of can-do attitude. A lot of the time I hear golfers, oh, am I ever going to get this? You know, I'm not going to be able to do it. This is too difficult. Why can't I do it? You need that positive attitude. And without that, it's very difficult. Nothing else can work. All of these elements can be there, but if you haven't got that positive sort of attitude, it's very difficult to improve. It's actually very difficult to coach somebody with a negative attitude as well. You've got to be patient. Changes take time, and I'm going to show you a video in a moment. And I hope you can hear the video. I'm sure you will be able to, but I just want, as I play it, I just want to get some thumbs up if you can hear the sound in a moment. So if some of you can do that. I think I've got a question. No, it's fine. And bigger picture. We need to focus on the bigger picture. So this is Butch Harmon here, just talking about a practice. This is at a PGA coaching seminar in America a few years ago now. I'm going to fast forward the video on. So before I do that, can I just get some thumbs up if you can hear this? Welcome to the 54th Annual Metropolitan Educational Forum. If you turn your sound up. Looking around the room here, there's very few. Can you hear this? For good reason. Welcoming Mr. Butch Harmon today. Thumbs up? Yeah, great. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Now, let me just skip it on to the point. For his assistance, but we've had just 3 back-to-back incredible.
One of these members, he's 6'7". He comes in and he's up.
One moment. Okay.
I've been telling him, you don't need to overuse it, but it's always good to have it. Okay, practice thoughts. I got a whole bunch of them written down here. I'll just go through some of the stuff I think is important. Progress comes through practice. Perfect practice, not just hitting balls. If you're standing there firing away and you hit a bucket of balls in 20 minutes, you haven't done any practice, you get an exercise. So you have to explain to your students how to practice, what they need to practice. No average golfer likes to practice what they're not good at. They always want to go to the range and practice what they do well. They don't want to practice what they do poorly. That's our job, to make them do the stuff they don't do well. So perfect practice will make permanent, not practice. If you're practicing the wrong thing, you're going to continue to get worse. Our job is to explain to them how to do it. Some of the other stuff, and this is all stuff I learned from my dad, the learning process takes time. How many times have you given a guy a 30-minute lesson and he goes out and doesn't play any good? He says, yeah, I took that lesson with that guy, but I threw that out. That didn't work at all. And you listen to the best players in the world when they do interviews, when they go through swing changes, said, yeah, it took about 6 months till I felt comfortable with this swing change. And this 18 handicap didn't feel good because he didn't play any better in a 30-minute lesson. You've got to explain that to them. We have to tell them that practice and change is going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight.
So I thought that was really, really interesting there. Can you hear me again now, guys? Am I? Yeah, great. I thought it was really interesting there. I came across that on a coaching forum on Facebook, and I saw it and I thought I've got to put that in because it's sort of really true, and I see it a lot. It's difficult to accept, I think, that, you know, in this game we play, if you want to improve, it does take time. And he, you know, Butch was saying that, you know, you can work on one thing for 6 months. I've worked on one thing for a year, and I still continue to work on the same thing now as maybe I did a long time ago, because I don't have enough time to improve over a short period of time. So I'm just improving that. I'm trying to improve that same one thing. It's going to take me longer because I don't get the time to do it enough to get the change to happen quick enough. So it just takes a little bit long time. I just got a comment there. Yeah, and Dave Tunks, and that that takes 6 months to make that swing change is also practicing daily. Very good point, you know. So yeah, these things do take time. So again, this is expectations, where we manage our expectations. We don't want to try and force things. We don't want to force changes because they just won't happen. So that's my responsibility to make sure that the coach is that the student is not doing anything that I don't think they're going to be able to do with the time that they've got. But also their responsibility to kind of think, well, okay, you know, is this realistic? Another question in here. What do you think of practice with swing analysis devices such as ZEP and TrueSwing, and also launch monitors? So for those of you who don't know, ZEP, TrueSwing, they're these little things that clip onto the golf club, and they give you feedback on what your club's doing. Also launch monitors will track the ball and track what the club is doing. It's great to have feedback when you practice. It's really important to have feedback when you practice because it gives you some kind of basis of how you're doing. I get my golfers all the time to video themselves practicing. I show them what we're working on during practice. Excuse me. Show them what I want their swing to look like to be able to produce the outcome, and get them to video it so they know what they're looking for when they're practicing. And okay, they might not hit every shot perfect, but they start to see their swing looks like it's coming on, and it's coming on. So that part of it is really key. Yeah, feedback, absolutely key. Very, yeah, good question there. Thank you. So a few competitive practice examples. So, you know, I spoke a lot about competitive practice and how important it is. I'm going to give you a few examples here, just a few that you might want to take away with you. And again, I'm going to send this out recorded so you can watch back and you can steal these from me. Very straightforward. In fact, I had a couple of questions as well about what are the best putting and what are the best chipping ones, all that kind of stuff. And you'll see at the very, very end, I'm going to answer those questions specifically. But putting, for example, what could you do when you're putting? Set yourself out a target zone, stick 4 tees around the hole and putt to it. That's block practice. And then you might say, okay, that's my block practice. I've done 10 balls to the same target and I've got 10 out of 10. That's easy. We might change the length. We might, each one of those balls could be from a different angle. Then now we're starting to have it varied. Now maybe you're not getting 10 out of 10. Maybe you're now getting 7 out of 10 because it's a little bit more difficult. Funnily enough, it's a bit more like it is when you're on the golf course. Then we might make the putts longer. And then we might say, okay, we only get to do this once when we do our practice session. And by the way, you need to write it on a scorecard and show me next week. Now we're starting to add some competitive elements into it. So maybe seems easy on the face of it, but actually in reality, maybe not quite so easy. Short game, there's a game called 21. I played this tons growing up, brilliant game. Very, very straightforward. You take your short game area, you choose one flag, and you put 9 golf balls around the outside of the green, and you have to chip and putt each ball, and total score has to be below 21. So if you can score below 21, that's a pretty good average. Now, okay, first of all, you do all those balls and they're all from nice lies and you score below 21, great. Now we make it more difficult. We put them in poor lies. We move them further apart. We maybe put one in a bunker. We might put one above your feet, one below your feet. Now let's see how you score. Okay, you'll score 25 or 26. So that's a good game there for short game. And every one of these games, and this is how I want you to see your practice, is I want you to see your practice by playing games, is we keep making those games more difficult, whereby you are not scoring 10 out of 10 all the time, but you are scoring somewhere between 4 and 7. Because if you're scoring between 4 and 7, it's difficult enough that you're pushing, but it's not too difficult that you can't do it. And it's not too easy that you're getting 10 out of 10 the whole time. So you're in that kind of what's called sort of a stretch zone. You're being tested, and that's really key. This was the game I give to some people, and this was the one of my students text me her score. In my opinion, to play good golf, we need to hit shots that are graded to our relative ability about a 7 out of 10. And because a big misconception is that we need to hit good shots all the time to play good golf, and that's absolute rubbish. We don't have to do that. It's relative to our ability. The best players in the world will hit a few shots that they're really, really happy with. They hit a few shots that they're really, really not happy with, but they hit lots of shots that are kind of, for them, 7 out of 10. Now, for you and I, they'd be 11s out of 10, okay? But for them, they're 7 out of 10s. And that's where you need to be to play good golf for you. And as you improve, your 7 out of 10 becomes a better quality golf shot. So this is a game I give to one of my students, and I say, right, you get to do this game once when you practice. At the end of your practice, you've done your block practice, your 20 balls, you've randomized it by changing your target and changing your club. Now you're going to do your next 20 balls as a competition, and you need to text me. And I know that you practice on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so I'll be waiting for the text message, okay? So there's that accountability, which you need. And she'll send a text message, and it will simply say, 7, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 9, 8, 3, 7, whatever. And then over time, we can start to see the shots improve and the 7s out of 10. How many? Okay, more 7s. And actually, the feedback I got from this particular golfer, she said, I actually have been trying too hard for too long to hit the best shots I possibly can all the time. And it's draining. It's hard work. It's disappointing when you don't hit the shot that you're trying to hit. But in reality, it doesn't happen. How many times have you hit a shot that's a bit thin or a bit on the toe or a bit on the heel, and actually it's worked out and you've managed to achieve the score you want on that hole? You know, many times that will have happened. So that's a really good game for that one. Driving, very simple. Goalposts, this is a really simple. I used to practice at a driving range. I was fortunate enough, they had big telegraph poles in the distance, and I used to say, okay, that's my fairway between that post and that, or that pole and that pole. You can choose 2 yardage markers to aim between. And this is where I was talking about our aim a little bit earlier on. Don't aim with a driver at a target. Because when we're driving, again, if you saw my webinar on course management, we're aiming at a zone. Make sure your goalposts are at least a fairway wide. In fact, just a bit more than a fairway wide, because most of us would be happy if we hit our ball in the semi-rough all the time, because we can play it from there. So that's a good one there to practice, and again, to score. How many can I get through my goalpost out of my 20 balls? Really straightforward. How do we make it more difficult? We bring the goalposts in. So my scratch players are hitting through 15 or 20 yard goalposts, and my beginners are hitting through goalposts as wide as the driving range, and that's fine. And all of these games, whether you're a beginner or you're a tour pro, it can be adjusted to your level of ability. The eye line, I mentioned this one already with Tiger Psychology. And then a general good one for being on the golf course. I use this one with the juniors a lot of the time, I did in the past. It's called US Open. Now, if you know a lot about the US Open, you'll know that typically US Open golf courses are set up with very long, thick rough. So you do not want to miss the fairway. And if you miss the fairway, a lot of the time you have to chip out sideways because the rough is so thick, you actually can't advance the ball forwards. So what we would do is say, every time you miss the fairway or outside of the first cut, for example, you have to chip 90 degrees back onto the fairway, and then you play. You have to record your score. So no doubt your score is going to be higher than normal, but it puts you under that pressure to hit the fairway. So that's a good game for on the course. Oh, sorry, one moment. Okay, so a practice system. This is what we're trying to get to. We're trying to have a practice system. And, you know, a system is termed as an effective way of doing something. In our lives, we have systems for doing things. It's important we have a system for practice. So it should be simple. It should be doable. It should include the 3 types of practice, and it should be we should have the coach and player make it. It should be kind of a joint thing. Now, I could make a practice system for you, and then we adapt it as we go. If you're a current student of mine, we'll figure out your practice system, and then we will adjust it over time. If you're not, then you can be given a practice system, and then you can adjust it yourself as your scores start to improve with your competition or as your swing starts to evolve. So really important that we have that system. Okay, we are getting near the end. So I'm going to give us just a little brief summary really of today. You know, good practice is about how, not how long. All practice sessions should apply the 3rd rule, so block, random, and competition. Practice should be split into the 4 areas. So unless you are advised otherwise by your coach, it should be split into the putting, short game, scoring zone, or long game. And it should have some competitive element, making it more difficult than the real thing. We must have the correct mindset when we practice. Okay, so I've got a few questions that were sent to me. Now, like I said, I had 65 sign up. We haven't got that many, unfortunately, online, but I did have a lot of questions. So I have just put the questions down of those that I thought were the ones that would be most beneficial for the group. The others, if I don't answer your question, please feel free to just email me and prompt me with what your question was, and I will respond to you as soon as I can. So, hitting balls before a round. So this question came up a lot. So how do I practice before a round? Or what's the best way to practice before a round? Or when I'm hitting balls before I play, what should I be doing? Well, I think you need to think about your practice on the range before you play, not as practice. Or hitting balls, it's not practice, because we don't have time to be thinking, if you like, really kind of that in depth about our golf swing just before we're going to go and play. We want to be relaxed. We want to be warming up. So it needs to be a warm up. So when we hit balls before, it needs to be a warm up. It needs to start with some block practice with a short club. So it needs to start with, you know, let's say 6 or 7 balls with a wedge. If you watch a great player, or any really good player, if you like, warm up before they play a tournament, they will start with a wedge. They'll hit a few balls with a wedge. They might then hit some fuller swings. They'll then skip up to an 8 iron. They'll then skip up to a 6 iron, and they'll work their way up through the bag. So hitting balls before a round, don't hit too many. Don't wear yourself out. Don't look for the magic. Don't look for the secret just before you're about to tee off, because unfortunately, you're not going to find it. Not in that short period of time anyway. But yeah, start short, work your way up. Most importantly, finish hitting balls with the club that you're going to tee off with on the first hole. So if the first hole, you know that you're going to hit your hybrid off the tee, or you're going to hit your driver, or you're going to hit your 7 iron, or whatever it is you're hitting off first tee, go through your warm up, hit all of your balls, and then the last few balls, finish with the last few balls being the club you're going to hit on the first tee. And don't hit balls with too big a gap between when you've hit the ball, your last ball on the range, to when you tee off. Try and do it quite close to your tee time. What's the best way to practice with limited time? So this will apply to many of you. So I can go to the driving range once a week and I can do 50 to 100 balls. Well, I think I've answered that question already. Make sure that your time is split. Make sure that you know you've got a clear objective in your mind, you know what it is you need to practice, and you split your time up. If you've got 100 balls to practice with, split those balls into, let's say you're going to do 100 balls on the driving range. You might do, you know, we do our 25, our third rule. So we're going to do some block practice, some varied, and then we're going to test ourselves at the end. If you've only got a certain amount of time and you want to do some short game as well, again, split your session into what's most appropriate for you. Don't just go and hit those balls on the range. Go to the short game area. So really, it's up to you, but it needs to be devised based on what it is you need to work on, and split it up accordingly. Best chipping drills are around the green, putting drills. There's one last thing at the end of this that I'm going to come to, and that will be answered in there. How to set up with alignment sticks. This was, if you don't know what alignment sticks are, they're these sort of graphite plastic type rods that go in your bag. A lot of people, golfers, use them to lay them down. Best way is to stand, whenever you're lining anything up, stand back from your golf ball and look straight down the target line as if you're shooting a gun. That's the only place you're going to be able to see your line, and place your alignment stick down outside your golf ball, so that when you stand over the golf ball and you look down, you're at 90 degrees to your target. You're looking at 90 degrees to your target, but that line's in front of you. Helps you keep your club face square, and that's the best way to do it. Don't overthink your alignment. So often I see golfers hit the ball wayward and then say, oh, you know, I must have been aiming over there. Well, Probably not, actually. A lot of the time when we don't hit the ball where we aim. So it's not our alignment. Practice for beginners. I would say it's not really any different. Practice for any level of player. There needs to be that competitive element. If I was to err on this one side, I would say for beginners, when you very, very first start, you need lots of repetition because you need to get the feel. So lots of block practice and then lots of competitive practice. The random practice, maybe not so much. So lots and lots of hitting balls to get a feel, because that's what creates the feel and grooves in the feeling. And then go round to the green and see how many balls you can chip and putt near the flag in so many shots, because that's what you're going to be doing when you get onto the golf course. If you're hitting a 7-iron over and over and over again on the driving range for 6 months, and then you get introduced to the golf course, you're in for a shock, because that's not golf. So the sooner we can get a golfer onto, you know, the short game area, as soon as we can get a golfer onto the academy course, in that environment, having those little bit of competitiveness where we've got to get the ball in the hole in a number of shots, the sooner we can do that, the better. Home practice nets, good, bad, and best way to use them. This is, I'm sure many of you have used this during this lockdown. Best way to use them, we can't see the ball, so we don't have the feedback. Unless you're fortunate enough to have a launch monitor, we don't have that feedback other than the quality of strike. So focus on the quality of strike. If it feels like a good quality of strike, it's a good quality shot. If you hit the ground before the ball, or if you hit off the toe or the heel, it's obviously not. So focus on that, and focus on your timing. Set yourself up a metronome, something that keeps a constant beat. Get yourself into a rhythm to get that feel for your swing. And video your swing if you know what you're looking for. Again, you can tie that in with me. Online lessons, something that you should think about. I do online lessons. I have students in America who I coach, and we do it all remotely. So if we can do it across the pond, we can definitely do it a few miles down the road. And finally, motivation for practicing on the range rather than the more enjoyable aspects. Again, having a partner, making the less enjoyable parts more enjoyable by way of creating those games and challenges. Give yourself a challenge. Make the challenge easy enough so that you can get close to achieving it, and then make it more difficult as you go. But really, I think if you really want to improve, to be blunt, you will be in that, you have that mindset. You need that mindset that you've got to work on the parts that aren't enjoyable. That's all part of the process. Make the worst part of your game. I think, as Butch said, you know, golfers don't practice what they're not good at. They only practice what they're good at or what they enjoy. You need to practice the bad stuff. Can we practice anything during lockdown? It's very difficult. You can. Indoor putting is really good. There are some really good things you can do putting, using your nets. If you have lessons, sending your, if you have lessons away from me, film your golf swing and send it to your coach and say, what do you think? It's a great way of doing it. You absolutely should be doing some practice during lockdown if you can. Get in the garden and swing the club. If you're a beginner golfer and you're just getting used to the swing, get out and swing the club. Give yourself 50 swings a day, just get out there and start to do it. A couple more. So any household items we can use to help with muscle memory in the swing? This is quite a specific question. It depends on the individual. It depends on what you're working on. There are lots of kind of things that I use with my students when we're practicing, whether it's towels or bands or small golf balls or tennis balls or footballs, whatever it might be, for specific swing moves. So yes, there are, but it very much depends on what you're trying to do. And I wouldn't give anybody here one specific drill that they should do or that you all should go and do now with a household item that's going to improve your game, because that's not realistic. It's too individual. But yeah, absolutely, we need to be creative during these times where we're not able to get out and use the driving range. So Absolutely. Um, Finally, is there a point in time where practice can become counterproductive? That's a really good question. Um, Two ways. One, is there a point in time? I'll answer it a couple of ways. Is there a point in time during a practice session that it can become counterproductive? Yes. And that is when we either start to fatigue or we start to lose interest. The moment either one of those kick in, you need to stop. If you practice when you're fatigued, you will not get the best out of your body. You will not be able to perform during your practice. If you practice and you start to get bored, or you start to rush shots because you've lost purpose, you need to stop again. There's no point in practicing. Then it becomes counterproductive. Or can that can it be a point in time in our life when practice becomes counterproductive? Can we become too old that practice and golf lessons? Here's a lot of time too old for golf lessons. Can practice become counterproductive as we get older? No, I don't think it can, because it can be the most simple things. Whether it all comes down to ability. If you've got the ability to go and play golf at a certain age, you've got the ability to practice something. So whether it's a very, very simple putting game that you do, whether it's a really simple chipping exercise, or it's a simple driving exercise on the range that you do, that all counts as practice. So no, I don't think it comes a point in time in a golfer's career where it can become counterproductive at all. Okay, so that concludes the webinar, but I've got one more thing I'd like to add to the end of this, and I was thinking about maybe this might interest you as we kind of continue in this very frustrating lockdown. It looks like we're going to be into March at the earliest until we get to play some golf. And I'd like to just get a few, please feel free just to drop me a note on the chat just to say yes or no, or drop me an email. I will send it out again. If you'd be interested in maybe a 4-week webinar series where we devise a practice system for each part of your game. Now, this will be a group thing, and then the practice system, if you have lessons with me, we will then adapt it to your level of ability, and we will change it as we go, but it's a starting point. If you don't have lessons with me, it's something you can take away and use on your own, and you can change it yourself. So it'll be a 4-week webinar series, and we will go through I will give you a practice system for each part of your game. So it will be for your short game, your putting, your scoring zone, and your driving. And if that's something that you'd be interested in, it'll be a similar kind of format to what we're doing here today. I don't know how long we've been going for now, but it won't last as long as today. But going forward in my programs, this is something that I'm going to start to put in as well. But during this lockdown, if you can get something like this under your belt, come middle of March or whenever it is where we back out there again, you've got your practice system and you're ready to go for the first time you get out to the driving range. So I'll only do it if I have enough interest. So if there is enough interest, yes, please. A few people on there on the chat saying yes. So if that is of interest to you, I'll put it together. If it's not, then no problem, I won't. Quite straightforward. But it is something I'll be putting more into my coaching systems as well. So please do let me know again. Just get in touch. A few more on the chat. Yes, please. Good. Okay, great. Well, I'll get something out over the next in the next few days or so, and